All right, so today's July training, importance of completely unplugging while on vacation. So, it's really hard sometimes when we work, work, work. We are Americans that work all the time, and we have paid time off at most companies, and many of us don't take it. So, we
Mm.
thought this will be a great topic to kind of jump into. But before we get started, I want to welcome you, Brett, for joining us, and thank you for being a part of this interview and for being a contributing writer to Workspace Spark. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the career coaching industry.
Yeah, thank you. So my background is pretty much all education. So I come from a family of educators. My grandma was a teacher, my sister's a teacher, my stepdad was a teacher. Now he's an athletic director for a high school, and then my mom's an attendance secretary for an elementary school. So I kind of had that mentality like growing up. It's interesting how you have like a family who's in education and how much that contributes to how you're raised. And
Right.
so I think for me, I always wanted to be an educator, even though they were telling me like, no, you're really smart, go do something that's going to pay you a lot more. And I had also always been interested in business. So I didn't come from a lot of money. My mom was a single mother of two, and so I had to like hustle for anything that I wanted. Like if I wanted a new video game, I had to buy it with my own money. And so I fell in love with like entrepreneurship. And so between business and education, that's always kind of been the focus of everything I've done career wise. So I actually went to school for business education to teach business. And throughout that process and throughout my career, I've kind of just navigated different ways that infuse both business and education together. And from that, I really stumbled into career exploration and career development and helping college students. I really started with high school and then college students and then kind of adult and working professionals. So I really fell in love with the work of like meeting somebody and then seeing where they are after my involvement with them, and like being able to inspire and motivate them and provide them with resources that I didn't necessarily have growing up, to help them get to where they wanted to be. And I just kind of fell in love with that process, even though for me it just kind of started as like a side hustle. I kind of fell in love with the seeing the progression in my clients. And so now I've shifted a little bit. I started just freelance resume writing and shifted into career coaching. And now I kind of want to shift my audience a little bit even more to start targeting IT professionals and senior leaders and focusing more specifically on personal branding rather than kind of job search help. Because I found that like people think job search is like something that you start and stop whenever you're ready to make a transition. And so I work with people to help them understand that this is an ongoing process throughout the entirety of your career, and helping them come up with strategies to where they can focus more on this idea of like career maintenance rather than job searching every time they want to make a change.
That's a great point. Thinking about the longevity of what your career looks like and not
Hmm.
start and stop. I think that's great.
Yes.
So education was definitely in your DNA.
Yes.
So definitely, it's interesting how we're raised and our parents kind of push us in other things, but it's what we've known for so long. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's I think it's gonna be a big contributor to like my opinions on this conversation as well. So I'm sure we'll get to that.
Great. So let's get started. Why do
Okay.
people have such a hard time shutting off um, during vacation?
I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on their career, their individual career path. I know for a lot of people, myself included, sometimes is that we really love what we do. And so sometimes it's like we just want to work. We like what we do and we want to do that, even if it might be on vacation. I also know for a fact that a lot of people feel the need to work on vacation, whether there's pressures from their employer or if they just kind of personally don't want to get behind. And I can definitely relate to that. When I was working as a hall director, that job was very demanding. And I knew that every time I took a day off, I was a day behind. And so I think that that can also contribute to people having a hard time unplugging. But then I also think that people don't always do a good job of setting their own boundaries as it relates to work and life balance. And so they have their email notifications on, they have their LinkedIn notifications on, they have a habit of checking their emails when they're, anywhere. So I think there's a lot of different reasons why people have a hard time disconnecting. For me, I think I definitely have a hard time disconnecting as it relates to checking my email. That's kind of a big thing, and checking LinkedIn. Those two are kind of my big ones. But in general, my ultimate career goal is retirement, and so I can't wait until I get to the point where I don't have to work. So I usually kind of I like a traditional schedule. I like working Monday through Friday during the day and then having the weekends off, the nights and weekends off. Um, Partially because that's how I was raised. My family had that schedule. I like that schedule. Most of my friends are on that schedule. So I think it depends on each person, but I would say there are several different reasons why people have a difficult time disconnecting.
Yeah, I'm those people.
Yeah.
I'm a project manager,
Hmm.
and if I'm gone 2 days, that means I'm behind four, maybe,
And most of your projects are more than 1 week long, so you have that in your head still over the course of the weekend, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I have to prepare a lot before I take off time, which can
Mm,
cause some anxiety too. So that leads us to
right.
the next question. How can people prepare at work ahead of time to make sure that they are truly disconnected?
So I think for me personally, I think you have to have a solid understanding and a self-awareness of your own time management. So for me, I don't mind working a lot longer hours Monday through Thursday if it means that I don't have to do anything Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So to me, that is my version of work-life balance. It is on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. So I have to view it from all of those different points of view. Um, but I also think that one habit that I had to get in was leaving away messages. And I think it's such a very simple thing to do, but sometimes we just forget when we're in the rush of preparing for a vacation. And also, I think it goes back to those boundaries, right? Like if you set an away message, do not respond because then people are going to think that you're available. And so I think having that away message ready to go, I think if you are in a workplace where you're overseeing a specific area, finding somebody who can kind of take over that. Hopefully, you have a good working relationship with someone who's doing something similar, so that if they have to take vacation, you can kind of do the same for them. So I think it also has to, is important to build strong relationships with your colleagues in case you do have to go somewhere and they can kind of take over at least the easier tasky administrative things that you might not be able to get to when you're disconnected. But I think not only setting those boundaries but adhering to them, because if you're responding, they're going to want to have those conversations back and forth. And if you do have to do work, pick up the phone. Like, call someone. Do not have a back and forth email conversation that could take hours throughout a day. That could really be a 5-minute phone call. So if you really have to do it, I say get on a phone call, get on a video chat, so you can get back to your family or get back to your friends or whatever vacation looks like for you.
Yes. I the culture of the company I work for, they are not okay with picking up the phone. Most people would prefer to email, and
Hmm.
sometimes you can knock out so much back and forth
Right.
with the phone. So I think that kind of gets lost in the communication sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of people treat email as if it's an instant messenger, and
Yes.
it doesn't work that way. And so I think one of the things that I learned, so I did a 6-week online course at the end of last year in managing remote teams, which was, I'm glad I did it. Obviously now is showing that that was a good investment. But what they were saying was that so many companies treat email as if it is a back and forth messenger, that it reduces the ability to communicate effectively. And so setting very clear guidelines, I think, is important for a lot of people and companies, especially right now when we are working remotely. Like if when I at one of my previous companies, we had like a 48-hour window that we had to reply to emails within business days. And so that may change now. If that's your primary source of communication, you may expect that. But I think you have to be aware of expectations of your employer. And if those are not clear, having a conversation about, maybe we should set more clear expectations for our whole team. But if you are in a leadership position, I think that it's important to do that as well and say, for this type of situation, a phone call; for this type of situation, an email; for this type of situation, our Slack channel, or whatever. In it's interesting that how, like, when you're leading remote teams, it's a different skill, but it's also just more advanced planning and having more structure because you have people all over the place. So I think that, having those boundaries, having more structure, getting clear about that with your employer is really important.
No, that's a great tip. I totally agree. And you mentioned earlier about an away message.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I used to not want to put an away message. I don't know
Mm,
where that psyche came from, but I felt like I didn't want clients, because I was a client facing project manager. I didn't want
right.
clients to see that I was away. And it took my boss to pull me aside and say, look, you are away. You're setting the expectation. Um,
Right.
if not, you're just showing that you never take off.
Right.
So I started doing it. So I think that's a great tip as well.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot in the headlines lately that employers are having to revisit their vacation policies because people are not taking time off. And so they're like, you need to take this time off, because what they're seeing is that people are either not taking it and getting burnt out, or they're all taking it at the exact same time, and that pauses business functions. So a lot of companies are actually revisiting that and saying, like, you have to take this certain amount, whereas in the past, it's like you just accrue and accrue and accrue.
Right. No, I think that's, and companies have to revisit that. I think all companies need to revisit, and us, like you mentioned, expectations. Us as employees,
Hmm.
we should revisit what our values and what things, our life changes. When you have kids, it's different. When when you're single, you can work a little bit, but just because you're single doesn't mean you're a workaholic, right? So I think
Right. Yes.
they need to really revisit their own values as well. Have you seen where staying in touch backfired on anyone? So while you're on vacation and staying in touch, have you seen where that might have backfired?
I think really mostly just in terms of like people, like the whole point of taking vacation is to take a break. And when you have a good vacation, it allows you to oftentimes go back to work ready and like recharged. And sometimes if you're taking like a week long vacation, which is very rare for someone like me, but I know a lot of people who do, it can be sometimes difficult to transition back into work. But it can also be difficult to go back to work if you didn't really break. So it's like, I had this vacation, I paid all this money, and I'm not refreshed like I should be. So I think it's really important for people, especially those who enjoy their work, to say, I'm going to take a pause on this for right now. It'll be just fine. Nobody's really, for most of us, some people might be in more elevated positions, but I think for most of us, we could take a week off and it won't be the end of the world. But especially for people who like their job, it allows you to like get excited to go back. And so there have been several times where like right now, I'm kind of considering this somewhat of a vacation. So I am like off of Instagram, I'm off of Facebook. I have kind of gotten rid of a lot of things that were normally distractions, because I found those eating up all of my time. And, I think now is a really, really stressful time that people need to be aware of their mental health and not kind of consume most of their time with work and then their phone. Um, and so I know that, like, even outside of work, I think just having your phone can be a huge distractor. So I think the most that I've seen it backfire is that people take a vacation and then go back to work and feel like they never had a break in between.
Yes, no, I think that's good. And I can
Yeah.
see it in myself, and I'm sure people who listen to this interview can relate to
Yeah.
taking off. My current employer, we have unlimited PTO. And what I have noticed is people don't, because it's unlimited and no one's really tracking, most people
Hmm.
don't take a day here and there. They do take the whole week. And
Mm,
it's the first time that I've like been encouraged to take an entire week. And
yeah.
even though that sounds like I'm going to be so behind, it is refreshing to go back
Mm-hmm.
because you've taken enough time. Because, 2 days may not be enough time to decompress. So, no, I
Right.
totally agree. Have you seen where someone who is always working, how does that affect relationships? So you mentioned people who may not taking their time off, but how does it really affect relationships if you're always working and you're not taking off?
So are you attacking me? Is that what you're no? I'm kidding. So what do you mean like personal relationships outside of work?
Yes.
So I think this is a conversation that like I think is important to have because generationally there's a big difference, right? Like previous generations, they had kids at a younger age, so their families became such an important part of their life, whereas someone like me and a lot of my friends, most of us are single, most of us have no kids, we're career ambitious, and so that becomes a central focus of our life because we want that potentially someday, and so we're heavily invested in our career to get to that point to where we can be comfortable doing that, especially people like me who have a ton of student loan debt. I'm like, I don't want to even put myself in a position for that right now. And so I think that specifically has impacted my ability to kind of make relationships. But I think I have been able to find creative ways to kind of do that. And so for me, a lot of it is about networking.
Right.
And I transition how I think about networking. And instead of going about it from I'm meeting people to get a job, it's more so about I'm meeting people, I'm connecting people, I'm looking to make a genuine connection so that both of us can like build each other up. And so that's completely shifted my entire mindset around building relationships and around networking. And so I think it kind of infuses those two things. But then also, I think it depends on the person. Not everybody is looking to build relationships. Not everybody is looking to date or start a family anytime soon. So I think it depends on each person, obviously. But for the most part, I think you have to be able to do both because even if you are a working professional, as you know, as everybody who's been in their career for a decent amount of time knows that you can't get anywhere in your career without relationships. And so it's kind of a weird balance. I think it's a really good question.
Yes. I was raised that you make relationships with everyone in the job from the secretary to the accountant.
Hmm.
And that has served me throughout my career. So, just the balance of, I think everything's balanced. And you made a good point. Just because you're a certain generation or, doesn't mean that you're all the same. So, not
Right.
putting us all in a box. Some people are very
Hmm.
focused. And if that's your phase in life right now, then you may not be concerned about building other personal relationships out of work, maybe
Hmm.
a different path. So I agree with that, just making sure that you're clear on what your goals are.
Hmm.
What are some practical things people can do to make sure they stick to shutting down? So we talked about how important it is to shutting down, but what are some things they can do to make sure they stick to it?
So I'd say like start with your phone because it is
Guilty.
such
I'm so guilty.
it and I am too. I think only more recently because of COVID have I kind of started to look at that a little bit more. There's a little bit of feedback on your end. I think maybe just turn the volume down a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I got distracted.
What are some practical things people can do to make sure they stick to shutting down?
Okay, yeah. So I think starting with the phone because having the phone with us at all times is really beneficial as we know. But for a lot of us, that means that this is work too. And so even when you leave the office, you still have your email, LinkedIn for someone like me, Instagram for other people, Twitter for a lot of other people. And those are huge distractions unless you're using them intentionally to achieve the goals that you have. And
Right.
so I think for me, especially now, I'm like, well, what am I missing out on? Other people in their house? Or like me seeing people go out when that's just only going to make me mad. So I think you want to start with your phone. However, you monitor email. I've been reading this book, The 4 Hour Work Week, where the author talks about only checking email twice a day. And I'm like, that would be a dream. And I think that it's very realistic. You have to be able to set those expectations and uphold those boundaries. But I think email is a huge one. So for me, I don't have any email notifications on my phone at all.
Wow.
No, no, I will check because I check it so frequently. But like no notifications because I am horrible at multitasking. I will be in the middle of something and get a notification and completely snap me out of it. And so I think I like to maintain my focus. And so my phone doesn't have too many notifications at all, unless it's like Slack for work. Um, but yeah, I would say just disconnect for at least a week from your biggest time consumers, especially the ones that are non-work related, because those first couple of hours and then those first 1 to 2 days are the worst. It's almost like quitting cold turkey, like an addiction. But like at this point now, I'm like, what am I missing out on?
No,
And
you're right.
other people watching the same Netflix shows that I'm watching. So I think that's a tangible step to just at least commit, like, I'm going to stop doing this for at least a week, because that's long enough for me to kind of get through that like withdrawals phase and that boredom. But then it's also forced me to be more productive. It's forced me to learn how to create entertainment for myself. It's forced me to get outside and go for walks and do different things. So I think you have to start with your phone, and then even your like laptop, having the notifications off on there, and then having dedicated time to check your email or to check your social. Especially if that isn't involved in your work, how LinkedIn is for someone like me. But I think those notifications, there's a lot of psychology behind that, and how
Yeah.
like you know how like you'll feel a buzz and you're like, who texted me? And then you look and it's like nobody texted you. um, so I think that that's part of it. I think other tangible things that I would say to do are to, block off time on your calendar for specific activities. If you're like me and I always thought that I multitasked well, just because I get a lot of things done. But I realize that like when I'm in the zone, I can knock out an 8-hour workday in 2 hours.
Right.
Um, but if I have email that are constantly buzzing and distracting me, and people potentially popping into my office or sending me something on Instagram, like that's going to take me out of that. And I think that's an important thing to mention now, because while people actually have the flexibility to work remotely, you should not need to work 8 hours a day for the most part, unless your job requires that. And I think that that's an important topic to have conversations with people, especially leaders who are like, I need to micromanage my people to make sure that they're working 40 hours a week. It's like, that's the whole point of having a salary, is to pay them per year to do a job, not to be in a specific place for a specific block of time. That's what part-time work is. So I know I got off on a little bit of a tangent or
Oh, no,
rant,
I think
but
that's important, and especially for leadership. We're back to expectations, right? Setting expectations
hmm
on not just boundaries for when I go on vacation, but also boundaries on um, my work time, and
right.
filling my calendar with things that are meaningless.
Yeah.
I need to work on the phone thing. I
Yeah.
I'm gonna take that challenge. I don't know if I can do a whole week. Maybe 4 days.
Do it. You can do it.
I was reading the book Digital Minimalist and Minimalism,
Okay.
and it talks about the psychology of notifications and
hmm
the psychology of the like button, and
hmm
how we're drawn to seek out those things to keep us in the loop, to keep us scrolling.
hmm
So
And
yeah,
that's an interesting topic, and I can't remember specifically what it was. If I can find it, I might send it to you. But there's also an impact on like your patience, and so they were saying it's like almost somewhat kind of its own form of like ADD, ADHD in that category, where they're seeing symptoms of people where like you're so used to like being so connected and things coming so quickly, like you start to see people who are more frazzled throughout the day. So like they're at a stoplight and it turns green and the person doesn't immediately take off, they honk the horn, or like they're in a rush to get different places. And so it like impacts a lot of different areas of your life. And so I think, now especially is a really good time to kind of at least try to disconnect, where we have maybe it seems kind of counterintuitive now that most of us are living virtually
Right.
to disconnect. But I think for me to focus on my work during my work hours and then to kind of leave everything once it's done has been extremely difficult for me. But I know that now is a different time. There's an extra layer added onto every other issue that everybody has going on in their lives. And
Right.
so I think to remove a little bit of those stressors that are not necessarily obvious stressors, to kind of focus on you and make sure that you're good. And then I think it's important for you to have conversations with your supervisors if there are things that need to be different. So one of the things that I've done in my current role is, we're expected to have 4 weeks booked out. And at this time, like, it's kind of crazy. Like, I don't always want to go and have a 30-hour coaching week. There are some times where I'm like, I just don't feel like talking to 6 people on the phone every single day. And so
Right.
I've kind of reeled that back to like having it out for 1 week or 2 weeks. And all that took was a simple conversation. It's not impacting my ability to do my job any. It's just me being self-aware and understanding, like, how do I adapt to this situation, this unheard of, type of situation, to make sure that I'm able to do the best job that I can.
I think that's super important. And being able to be bold enough to have the conversations that
Hmm.
affect you. And like you said, you were able to get what you wanted and it didn't change anything too much for you.
Hmm.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, I think if anybody's interested in trying to find any way to kind of navigate that situation, I think it's important to not just present ideas. I think that that's something that I struggled with as a young professional. It's like, hey, I want this. It's like, okay, do you have a plan? Do you
Right.
have, what is this going to look like? And then so if you have kind of an idea to do that, I would say present it with more than just the idea to your supervisor. And I would say if there is a little bit of pushback, tell them, or ask them, can we just try it?
Right.
That's important to ask, because a lot of times you will get pushback. And then what I see a lot of times in the workplace, and this doesn't impact me because I've always been the kind of person who's like, I'm going to say what I want and fight for what I want. But I know that not everybody's that comfortable. And so I think that a lot of times people will ask once, and if they don't get a yes, they always back down. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important for you to have the confidence to disagree tactfully with your leadership in a way that you can both come to a compromise, and that you're not just like, well, I tried and it's not going to work that way. Don't be afraid to come back and say, okay, well, can we just try it? Let's just try it for a week or two. And if it doesn't work, I'll go back to this way.
No, that's some great tips. No, I totally agree. And not being your employer should value who you are as a worker. And if you are doing your best at work, why not be able to try it? So I totally
Hmm.
agree with that. How does time off help your mental and physical well-being? We kind of touched on this, but why do you think that, taking time off, how does that affect you mentally?
So I think for me, it allows me to be more creative, at least for me. So I don't work well at night, like doing like work. But if I'm like creating graphics or working on flyers or designing social media visuals, I like to do that at night. I feel like I'm more creative at night, and so my daytime is often filled with like those tasky administrative things that I'm not going to do at 10, 11 p.m.
Right.
And so taking that time off allows me to pursue my other interests and my other hobbies. And I always tell people, like, I think innovation comes from just diversity in general, like differing ideas, differing cultures, different things. And so I love music. I love to go to concerts. I love art. I go to a lot of art shows. A lot of the talents that I don't have, I like to observe. But
Same for
those things, yeah, those things give me ideas. Those things give me like, I wonder if I could infuse this thing that's completely unrelated to what I do into what I do and create something that's never happened before.
right.
So I also am kind of a workaholic, but in the sense that like one of my biggest hobbies is taking classes. I love to learn. And so that one example, I took a full week bartending course. It was 6 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday for 1 week, 15-hour course. And through that experience, I loved it. I had so much fun. I learned a skill, me not having a full-time job at the time. I was like, if I needed to, I could do this. But then also I was like, I could potentially create a resume template for the person who's running these classes, like a bartending resume template. And so it was weird how like we found a way to make both of the things that we do work, because not only was she trying to help people learn a new skill, she was helping them find bartending jobs. And I was like, well, I'm a career coach. We can, you know, find some. So I think it allows you to explore your other interests and your other hobbies. And I personally think that that is magic when it comes to infusing those things, because that is that nobody else can do that. Like nobody else can put those things together unless they have the same exact experiences you have, which is pretty uncommon, I think.
No, I think that's important. I think that having hobbies and like we're talking about taking off to do those hobbies are important. I don't think that
Hmm.
job should be the only thing that you do. I'm actually getting my yoga certification right now. I
Very
have
cool.
no interest in teaching, but for me, it's how can I take those principles and include that in some of the business coaching that I do.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important, and it allows you to have some great conversation. It opens up your network for other people. So I totally, totally agree with that.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like I would have never thought that unless I did it.
Right.
And then since that, I've been able to connect her with other people. She's been able to connect me with other people, send clients my way. I've been able to like connect people who have the ability to hire me someday with her and her services. And so it goes back to relationships as well, taking time off away from your work relationships to build other relationships that could circle its way back into work, which is normally how it works. When I talk to people about networking, I'm like, most of the people that are plugging you into these different things are people that you connect with on a level much deeper than professional.
Agreed.
And that's when I talk to people. If you're looking to someone to reach out to on LinkedIn or somebody specific at an organization, find the person who has the things in common with you. Don't just reach out to a random person and expect them to give you a referral. Like connect with the people who also have dogs, or the people who also play tennis or also do yoga, because that's how you develop a deeper connection. And that's where that networking becomes so valuable and important, because we all know that, that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I would even go to venture and say it's who knows you. But I think that it's important to focus on that and focus on building relationships in general, because that makes the world go around, whether you're dating, networking for a job, trying to build a business, trying to buy a house and having people that you trust, getting a mechanic for your car. Like all of it is built around relationships. And so I think that it's important for you to have those professionally, but also personally, because the professional and the personal are not completely separate the way that a lot of people look at it. They're very much so intertwined in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people.
Yeah, I think now, hence why it's so important to take off time when you can, because your life does blend. Your personal life
Hmm.
blends into your professional life all the time. So I totally agree with that. This has been so great, Brett. I had great tips and tools. I'm hoping the people that listen to our interview can take some of these tips back and really learn to unplug while they are
Hmm.
on vacation. And I think it is even more important now
Yeah.
for the fatigue of being online and being on webinars and doing all this virtual stuff that we are just not used to. So, how can people connect with you? How can people connect with you and your brand?
Yeah, so when I'm normally connected, no, so I'm still very much active on LinkedIn. So it's just like linkedin.com/in/Brett Ellis 1, or you can just search for my name and put something like career coach or Atlanta. I should pop up if I'm doing what I'm doing right.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram at Brett Ellis CMS. I haven't been on there for a while, but I will be eventually. And then my website is brettelliscms.com. It stands for Career Marketing Services. But yeah, that's mostly where they can connect with me. I also have like personal Instagram. I think, specifically with me, I tend to keep those two things separate. Because they aren't oftentimes in alignment, because I like to go to concerts and I like to go to art shows and stuff, and they don't always blend the best together. So if you want to connect with me business wise or personal, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to build any and all kind of relationships that allow us to elevate each other.
Right. Well, this has been so great. You're so self-aware. You have great tips, and we're so great that you are a contributing writer here at Workspace Spark. Look forward to hearing from you soon. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.